Ladies and gentlemen, it's your boy Leel, and you are in for a show today as we have SUNY Cortland's president Bitterbuam getting in the huddle to talk about the New York sports teams. You may not know, but the New York Jets used to have training camp at SUNY Cortland from 2008 to 2014. Obviously, we had the Battle of New York that took place this weekend, and we have news that the Knicks, the dysfunctional Knicks, are looking to possibly move on from Coach Fizdale after the poor start. But first, we couldn't have Bitterbuam on the show without briefly discussing the Cortaca jug that will be played at MetLife Stadium. Ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The time is now 8 p.m. and you're listening to WSUC 90.5 FM The Dragon. First and foremost, happy Veterans Day to all those out there who serve this great country and continue to serve this great country and fight for our freedom. Today is a very special episode of In the Huddle. We have the president of SUNY Cortland here with us today, President Bitterbuam, to talk about the big Cortaca Jug game between Ithaca College and SUNY Cortland coming up this Saturday at MetLife Field in New Jersey for the first time ever. For those of you that usually tune into our show, we will go into our regular In the Huddle aspect in the 9 o'clock hour. But to start it off, I am Ken Connolly. My on-air name is Kenny C. I am the student government representative for WSCC radio station, also host of the Kenny C Show on Thursdays and co-host of In the Huddle on Mondays. And I am joined by Leel Lewis.
That was smooth, brother. I like the introduction right there. My name is Leel Lewis. I am vice president of WSUC. My on-air name is The Real Leel. I'm co-host of the In the Huddle Show and host of The Real Leel Show. Now I'm going to send it off to Rob.
Hi, I'm Robert Meyer. I'm Operations Director for WSUC. I'm the third and final co-host of In the Huddle on Monday nights, and I'm the host of Rob's Radio Showcase. And we're also joined tonight by Craig Mahar.
How we doing, guys? My name is Craig Mahar. I am the treasurer of WSUC FM and the co-host. I guess you can call me a co-host of the Real Leel Show on Fridays. I have my own segment, but you can call me a co-host. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce the man of the hour, President Bitterbuam himself. Mr. Bitterbuam, how are you doing this evening?
I'm fine. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it.
And real quickly, definitely to touch up what Kenny C said about the veterans that fight for this country, what you do is always going to be noticed, especially here in the Huddle.
Well, we appreciate that because I don't know if you guys remember, but today at 3 o'clock we had a ceremony in which we recognized our veterans, and one of our police officers actually served in Afghanistan and just returned, and Brandon gave a very interesting talk. It was well attended. It was in Jacobus, and I hope people will come in the future.
Yes, sir.
100%.
So I want to start this off. What was, President Bitterbuam, what was your first reaction when you found out that Cortaca was going to be at MetLife Stadium this year?
Well, it's a little complicated, so let me give you some history and then how it all unfolded. So in 1947, General Douglas MacArthur and the great sports writer Grantland Rice came together, and they decided they wanted to start a foundation to get more young men to go to college, because back in the 40s, not a great deal of folks went to college. And they thought by starting this foundation, it would encourage, they would underwrite it with obviously scholarships. It was called the National Football Foundation. It's not related to the NFL by any means. And it remained a very small foundation until about 35 years ago when they approached Archie Manning, the father of Eli and Peyton. Would he become the presidential figurehead? And he agreed, and because of his notoriety and of those of his sons, funds started to pour into the foundation, which allowed them to send more young men to college. They do have a big game every year, and they thought, I don't know how many of you realize this is the 150th anniversary of college football. And so the first one took place in 1869. They had leather helmets, and it was Rutgers against Princeton. And so they thought it would be great for the 150th anniversary, let's have Princeton and Rutgers play this game. And one of them refused. So it turns out the executive director of the foundation is an Ithaca College grad. His name is Mark. And he said, would you consider two Division III schools, the purity of the game? You know, we can't give athletic scholarships. And we were fortunate because the NFL does have a seat at the table, and that was the president of the New York Jets, Neil Glad at the time. And he knew us very well, and he said, of course, let's go with Cortland Ithaca, the biggest little game in America, according to Sports Illustrated. So the president calls and says, what do you think of this idea? I said, it's great. I'd love to have my football team come. She said, there's a catch. To rent MetLife for a day is $600,000.
Wow.
And I told Shirley, I can't use public funds, and I can't go to my alumni and ask them to help raise $300,000 for a football game when we have so many needs out there. And she said, well, why don't you wait? She talked to some of her graduates who were very wealthy, and they guaranteed the game. So she called me back, and I said, of course we're coming if it's free. And so that's how, now it's actually not free, we have to get our football team down there and a variety of other things. But that's how it all came about. And so it's a one-time only. We've broken the record, as you know, it was 37,000. She told me, I actually spoke with her today, see if there were any issues, and there aren't. But we're close to 45,000 tickets now have been sold, and I think it'll even go higher by the time game day, this coming Saturday.
Wow.
That's incredible.
Mm-hmm. So being that Cortaca is at MetLife this year, like we said, for the first time ever, tickets are going to amass 45,000. The place is going to be rocking. And do you believe that will affect the way either team plays with the pressure being on from the crowd noise?
Yeah, I think initially it can be overwhelming. I don't know if you realize this, but there's one sport in the NCAA where they play in an NFL stadium, and that's lacrosse. And in my time at Cortland, we've played for the national championship 5 times and have won it twice. In talking to our lacrosse players, when they first stepped into the stadium where there were 34,000, they had never seen people, those kinds of crowds. It was a little overwhelming. But they said once the game starts, you sort of put the crowd, it's behind you. They love the roar, but once our football players get hit, and they hit, it's a game, and they'll forget just how many folks are there. I think their adrenaline the first quarter will be really, really high. But after that, they're just, they're going to play and play the best they can.
I like the point that you just alluded to. When you get hit for the first time, you're in a football game.
That's
exactly.
Right.
So
yeah.
I definitely can see that. I believe once that first hit, once it kicks off, the nervousness will start to die down as the game progresses. We just seen a great rivalry this weekend in Division I, LSU and Alabama. What do you think rivalries do for colleges in general?
I think rivalries are fun. They bring out a lot of spirit, and it can get out of hand, and we never want that. But I played soccer in college, and our big rival was Whitaker, another small liberal arts college. And we played other schools, and it was always great. But when we were playing Whitaker, it just seemed like our engines were a little higher. And so I think it's just a lot of fun. Rivalries like the LSU Alabama one was great for TV, and it was great for the fans, and at least for a year they can brag. Next year it could be a whole nother story. It's interesting. We beat Ithaca 7 years in a row.
Wow.
There were some really unusual games. Last year we lost.
It was a rough one.
Right, it was cold. It was very cold.
Yeah, but we hope that we start a new tradition again. But it just brings out the best in athletes and hopefully in fans.
So before we get off this topic, we need to know what you think the final score will be and how you think this game is going to play out.
I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. Cortland obviously will win, but I think it'll be close. I think it'll come down to the fourth quarter. The one interesting thing about the Ithaca-Cortland game always, it's like the Army-Navy game. You never know who's going to win it. Mm-hmm. Even if one team historically was stronger that season, they keep some plays back. It's a unique rivalry, and so it doesn't matter what the records are. It's really quite extraordinary how well people play.
It's anyone's game.
Yes, it's going to be a very close game.
Yeah.
But I was looking at the stats too, and about the teams' seasons thus far, and both of our teams are currently scoring 40 points per game and allowing 19 points per game.
Wow.
Both of them. But Ithaca's coming off that 2-game losing streak, so.
Right. So we hope it doesn't change for them.
Yeah.
And definitely
Yeah, you said like maybe keep some plays back. I imagine the coach has got a page in the back of their playbook that just says Cortaca. They got a few trick plays.
They all do.
Yeah,
they all do. Yeah.
Definitely see those come out.
Yeah, I think you will. You know, you need a play that, you know, if you need a first down, that's when you call it or whatever.
Yeah.
And who knows, we may see it on SportsCenter Top 10 like a couple years ago, I believe it was.
It was what happened, it was a comedy of errors. I don't know if you've seen the film, yeah. So we were there to tie it. What happened is the holder was nowhere to be found, and at the last second comes running on. As you know, the ball came back, was on the ground. But they actually practice that. I didn't know this. It's a play called Fire, Fire. Almost everybody has it. What happens is the kicker then moves the block. The holder picks up the ball, and he practices throwing it. The two receivers who are blocking on the end peel off, and Ithaca didn't react. And so a man was wide open. He threw it. Instead of tying the game, we won it. And it was on ESPN as one of the top 3 plays in the nation. It'll be very even all the way to the end.
Yes, sir. I mean, I think we pretty much wrapped up Cortaca talk. And when we come back from a very short commercial break, ladies and gentlemen, we got some NFL talk. So definitely the request line is 607-753-4819. Once again, 607-753-4819. We have a jam-packed show today.
Go Red Dragon.
Ready to get this show on the road.
The catchphrase of all catchphrases.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our special edition of In the Huddle with President Bitterbuam. As we continue on with our conversation, we'll move into some NFL stuff as our next topic, and Craig will start us off here.
Yeah, so some interesting news in the NFL this morning. So just this morning at a press conference, I'm not sure if you heard this already, but Doug Marrone, who's the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the former tight end coach at Portland State Football, he was asked about this year's Cortaca Jug in his opinion, and his response surprised a lot of people. So what he said was, I think it's probably one of the most unique games that I've been involved with. I got a question a long time ago when I was in Syracuse. Someone asked me, what's the biggest game you've ever been in? I mentioned Portland State Ithaca, and people were pissed. They said, that's not true, there's no way. And I said, well, if you look at the standards of Woodside Judge games, it probably comes out on top. When you wake up, it's 8 o'clock in the morning and there's lines in front of all the bars. That's a pretty big game. It got crazy for a while. I think it's a great game. It's a great rivalry. I think that's what makes college football so great. It's that you have these rivalries and you have these fans and alumni that are involved. So this was posted this morning on the Jacksonville Jaguars official website. And it was pretty crazy to me to see a professional coach, reference his time at Cortland as one of his biggest games, in all of his life. So I'm not sure if you heard this until now, but what was your reaction, your first time hearing this?
Well, first of all, I met Doug. Let me share with you. So when he was a student at Syracuse, he played, he was very good. And his first year out of Syracuse, he was a graduate student assistant here at Cortland. And he told me that he watered the football field. Everything was done by hand back then. At the time, there was an assistant coach on the Jets that he was very close to, and he came down with his son, and they watched a practice, and that's when I had the opportunity to visit with him. I never knew that he had been an assistant coach here for a year. And then he actually took one of our assistant coaches when he went to Buffalo, as you know. And then from Buffalo, it's still a mystery why he left to go to Jacksonville. But I was very pleased when I heard that. I thought people are probably wondering, where is Cortland? And so I'm sure everybody Googled us, at least for a few minutes. We were well known. I did not realize he felt that way. But it is an extraordinary game, and so he's not incorrect.
Yeah, he's probably not lying coming from the state that he works at.
Yeah,
and I know that this game holds some weight.
Yeah,
that was incredible to me.
Yeah, I thought it was lovely.
But moving on here real quickly, I want to get into the Battle of New York that took place yesterday. We had the Jets who defeated the Giants 34-27. Obviously, these are two teams that are not in playoff contention right now. But a win is a win, and as a Jets fan that I know you are, I guess you can take it, right?
I will. You know, if you analyze the Jets, preseason, people had high hopes. Darnold was going to be in his second year. Everybody knew the offensive line was probably still a work in progress. But, you know, the number of injuries they've had, the mononucleosis. So actually, I was surprised they beat the Giants. I was very pleased. You have now two teams that are, what, 2-8?
2-7.
2-7.
Giants are 2-7. Giants
Right.
2-8.
2-8. And so it's a little embarrassing for us. You know, Joe Douglas, who's the GM, has a lot of work in front of him. I think Adam Gase will survive. You know, it's only his first year. Jets fans, as you know, you heard about renting the plane and the banner, you know, fire Gase. They did that with John Issick and Todd Bowles as well. New York fans have either you win or you lose, and you're gone. So
Talk about the Knicks. That's another topic.
Yeah,
So-
that's a whole other
That's a whole
thing,
nother
yeah.
topic.
so they're going to have to be patient, and I am surprised how poorly they have performed.
Going into this game, obviously these are two beat up lines like you mentioned. It really came down to which defense could get the most pressure. And a name that stands out to me from this game was Jamal Adams. He was able to break through the Giants line practically all game. He had 9 tackles and the 2 big strip sacks on Daniel Jones, one of which was the 25-yard touchdown. So I think that was just a big takeaway that I took from it was whichever defense would overpower the opposing offensive line.
Well, you know, he is an extraordinary player, and that's why a couple of weeks ago I was absolutely stunned when I heard the Jets were trying to shop him around. Here, once again, is a foundational piece of the puzzle. Jamal Adams is in a league of his own. And so, you know, hopefully he'll play for a decade for the Jets. He was extraordinary. You know,
Yes, he was.
I think he was angry, and he was
Oh,
going to
yeah,
show
he
the
is.
leadership
He wanted
of the
revenge.
Jets. You know, just how apparently he wasn't even speaking to the ownership and the GM. I mean, you have to grow up, and I'm sure they will. It's a business.
Yeah, Sam Darnold. I would say Sam Darnold to me has been very inconsistent.
Oh yeah.
Sam Darnold will have his moments where we're like, all right, I see why he was one of the top picks in the draft. And then he'll have his moments where he'll reference him seeing ghosts. And it sure looked like he does sometimes on the football field. But yesterday, to me, he looked poised in the pocket yesterday. He had a nice rollout downfield pass to Demarius Thomas. He finished with 230 yards and 1 touchdown. What are your expectations for Sam Darnold? How would you grade Sam Darnold?
Well, you know, I'm not an expert, but listening to everybody on the Jets, you know, I still have friends there. They think he's the real deal. But the truth of the matter is you have to protect him. And you have to give him other weapons. You know, he needs Chris Herndon, who was the tight end, is now down. He's
Big
out.
name.
You know, that's terrible. You have to open holes. You know, you have 2 good running backs, or Powell being the other one. So they have a lot of things they have to do. It's not going to happen in 1 year, but if they can start, you know, drafting and through free agency, choose wisely. I'm hoping 2 or 3 years from now we might make the playoffs again.
I definitely agree with what you said before about offensive lines. I think that needs to be their main focal point in the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, from what I saw of the game, it looked to me like, you know, like Kenny was saying before, that it's a game that hinged on which defense is going to make the big plays. And the Jets have Jamal Adams, who is a superstar player on defense. And when you look back at the Giants defense, there's not a big playmaker like Jamal Adams out there. And they don't have like a talented defense by any stretch of the imagination. So that game, the Jets are able to move the ball on offense. They're able to make the plays they need to make because the Giants defense is just not at the level it needs to be.
Right. Well, you had 2 bad teams going out.
Oh, yeah,
For sure.
So
Yeah.
Definitely.
yeah. So time will tell, as we always like to say in college.
As we look at the Giants, moving to the Giants here, to me, their offensive line have really been in disarray for the last couple of years. And it was evident yesterday because I thought Daniel Jones looked really good. I really did. I thought with the offensive line he had to work with, he was really making the best of his opportunities. I still worry about him fumbling the football. Obviously, we saw it when Jamal Adams was able to snatch the football away. I think he needs to be careful in how he holds the football. But I think he had a good game, but it's just the offensive line is terrible. And then Saquon Barkley kind of had a disastrous game, 13 carries for only 1 yard. I don't put much of it on Saquon because I know how talented Saquon is. I think it's more of the offensive line issues for the New York Giants.
So they both have real issues. The one interesting thing, I remember when Nate Solder was brought there from New England. You know, he was their big left, and he really hasn't panned out to the way. So so sometimes if you're in the right system, you play
Absolutely.
a lot better.
Do you think, we talk about trades and the Jets making moves, do you think because Le'Veon Bell to me haven't really fit in that system this year, and part of it is the offensive line, but it just hasn't worked. I don't know if it's Adam Gase's system in a way, but would you have made a trade of Le'Veon Bell? Do you think the Jets should have had done it?
I think he's a singular player, and he also come out of the backfield. He has great hands. I don't know that he's being used correctly. At least, of course, this is, Monday morning quarterbacking on my part. But I know he's a tremendous talent. And you can see, though, the holes were not there. It's kind of sad. So I would keep him.
I agree. I mean, if you don't have an offensive line, really any running back is not going to perform that well. I think that could be part of the system as well, but if they build a line, like you said, Le'Veon Bell has buckets of talent.
Yeah, I was watching the Minnesota Vikings. They had this young man that came out of nowhere. Is it Delvin Cook is his name?
Oh, Dalvin Cook.
Yeah.
Yes.
But look at the offensive line they have.
Oh, yeah.
They're opening big holes, and so the young man looks tremendous.
And it's crazy too. I had for fantasy football, I had drafted Dalvin Cook the last 2 years. So
You have?
Yeah,
Okay.
so he's dealt with injuries the last 2 years.
Right.
So he hasn't had a chance to come into his own as a player. And now he comes back fully healthy. They changed up the offense a little bit, more run heavy, and now when he gets his 25 carries a game, he's just taking down defenses
Right.
no problem.
Could you imagine Saquon Barkley with an offensive line like that?
Yes.
Like on the Rams, like Todd Gurley had the last couple of years. He slowed down this year, but
He's been hurt.
you look at the line that he had in the Rams when he was like that top running back, he's scary for defenses to go against
Right.
because of that offensive line he was working with.
And I think Ezekiel Elliott is very fortunate behind.
Absolutely.
So, I feel bad for great running backs who are in the middle of, a terrible
Offensive line. I have one more question for you.
Sure.
So we look at the Bills. I want to give the Bills a little burn here because we are in Central New York, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people up here are Bills fans. The Bills are 6-3. They just lost to the Browns yesterday.
That was a tough loss.
Do you
Tough
think
loss.
the Bills are a contender or a pretender?
No, I think they're a contender. So I remember everybody, when Josh Allen was coming out of Wyoming, he's big, he's inaccurate, and turns out he's turning out to be quite a good quarterback.
Yeah.
It reminds me of Roethlisberger. Hard to bring down. Give him a few more years. I think he's going to be very good. They have a good defense, you could see.
And he could run the football.
And he has a strong arm.
Yeah, very good mobility. Yeah.
So I think there's more surprises from the Bills this year.
And if you look at the AFC as a whole and the Bills' upcoming schedule, it's definitely possible in the AFC that they could become a wild card team. I mean, they have the Dolphins, the Broncos, and then I guess they play the Cowboys and the Ravens, but then the Steelers, they could win that. So
No. I think they should be able to make the playoffs again.
And the Cowboys are not as good as they are.
As they are advertised, yeah.
They should be a great team, but they play like a slightly above average team. Like they should be playing a lot better with the talent that they have.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the question is, will the head coach survive after all these years?
It's true. Yeah.
So that'll be interesting.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of coaches that are
on the hot seat. Yeah.
Even from football, we just heard about the Knicks today that David Fizdale was on a hot seat.
2-8.
Yeah.
2-8. But for New York, like you said at one point in the show, you win some and you lose some.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
New Yorkers are very impatient.
Yeah, we are.
If you listen to any of the major shows, whether it's Michael K, Stephen A, any of those shows,
Sure.
you listen to
And
those first callers, those morning shows. Oh, they're angry right away. There's Monday morning, the weekend, like if during the baseball season Yankee games were bad, you hear them first thing in the morning on Monday.
Well, you'll find this interesting. So the 5 years that we had the Jets here, a lot of these fans are very knowledgeable, and they have a lot of football acumen. It's very interesting. One of them that I really like, you hear of quite often, is Ira. And I got to know Ira, and he studies. It's extraordinary. He told his employer during the football season, when they're away, I get on an airplane and I go.
Wow.
His wife is very tolerant, and we met lots of fans like that. I don't know how they can afford it, but they do. But they are extraordinarily knowledgeable, and they carry, like you have, laptops, and you ask them in 1975, tell them what game it was, they'll look it up. They have all the data on their, it's extraordinary how passionate. I know people like baseball, they like, other sports, but football fans go the nth degree in my mind.
Oh,
Yes, sir. But I think we Knicks fans, I think we're on a whole nother universe. Especially with all that we've been through for the last, seemed like 40 years.
It's been a long
time. We thought, yes.
Remember Willis Reed, and that's so long. I was a young man back then.
I wasn't even born.
It's definitely, and like for you, Jaleel, it's definitely got to be tough being born a Knicks fan into this.
Bro, you
because
don't understand.
You haven't even seen a flash of greatness.
Not even a flash of greatness.
There's a glimmer of hope in there, here and there.
The little thing
sure,
that we think it was with Carmelo, but that was little something.
Very little.
Very
You
little.
were born in Brooklyn too, right? I'm surprised you haven't made the swap yet to Brooklyn. Like that says a lot.
I gotta
about
stay
your
loyal.
character.
I gotta
That says
stay
a lot
loyal.
about your character.
And you're from Brooklyn too, right?
Yeah, I'm from Brooklyn, born and raised.
Well, you could have two teams.
Yeah.
We won't hold it against you.
I generally respect the Knicks. I like Kyrie Irving. I like what he's doing. I think that, yes, the offense changed when he's there because he's an ISO point guard, but he brings buckets and he does bring that clutch gene that Brooklyn needs.
Okay.
I feel in the playoffs. The guy that's going, you want to get him the ball and he's going to shoot that shot.
And forget about it when Kevin Durant comes back next year. That team's going to be a powerhouse for sure.
But they should have came to New York. To
I
me,
mean,
it's two marquee free agents like that in a big market, the biggest market in the NBA, in the Knicks.
The
They
Knicks
should've
had
gone
70
Knicks.
million.
Yes.
You know,
They traded away the unicorn and got nothing in return.
Yeah, that's a puzzlement.
Yeah.
That really is a puzzlement.
But we really appreciate you
Yes,
coming today
No, it's
to talk to us.
my honor. Yeah.
We definitely got to do this again. We definitely got to do this again for sure.
it's great to have you here. Yeah.
So we
Well,
want
thank you for the invitation.
no doubt.
Thank you, and
Thank
go
you
Red
for coming.
Dragons.
Yes.
Go Red Dragons
So we'll
this
see you
Saturday.
at the game.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back from a very short commercial break to go on with hour number 2. We're going to be a 15-minute break, little intermission break. So when we come back, in the Huddle news, a lot of sports topics, week 10 of the NFL football season. I gave you no reason to turn that channel.
Stay tuned.
We have the New York Knicks. Oh God, we talked about the New York Knicks with President Bitterbuam briefly. But they are not ruling out in-season firings after a 2-8 start. The Knicks are in crisis mode, even though it seemed like they never left crisis mode. And it's talks that David Fizdale may be showing the door sooner rather than later. My personal opinion real quickly here is, if it couldn't get worse than what it already is for the New York Knicks. One day in my lifetime, before God calls me home, I would hope to see the Knicks do something.
Red Beats.